Come on, Livingston. We gotta go on and on and on. Together we can make it. We gotta go on and on and on. Come on, Livingston.
Knocks it through. Mullen bursting into the box. Josh Mullen.
Together we can make it.
Mullen's ball across, it's turned in! It's Pittman who's got it! Livingston leads!
Road is long.
Can they get the ball back in? O'Brien.
Lead! And Livingston have the lead!
Man, can score.
If we march together.
The full-time whistle blows and David Hayes celebrates! And the Livingston fans join in exultation.
Come on, Livingston.
Livingston have the lead against Rangers, and they are certainly rising to a few occasions on their return to the top flight in Scotland.
Come on, Livingston. We gotta go.
Hello and welcome back to Talk Livy, the podcast dedicated to everything Livingston Football Club and Scottish football. My name is Euan and today I'm joined by Angus, eventually joined by Angus. Angus, if you could explain to our listeners the reason why we're about 24 hours late in releasing our episode.
Probably because yesterday just completely overslept, and that's where we'll leave it.
I mean, we've had this issue before, Angus. I'm sure Talk Livy HR will be getting involved shortly. But good weekend all in, player of the year as well. We were both at it. It was a good night, wasn't it?
Yeah, very good. Obviously, we had a good wee table ourselves. A couple of people, the GS lads, and obviously getting to mingle with the men's and the women's players and that as well, which very, very fun time. Yeah, spirits were high following the culmination of a good season, and I can't wait for the next one.
Well, exactly. And as always, you can find this episode as well as all our other episodes on your preferred podcast streaming site. Just search for Talk Livy, so follow us or subscribe to ensure that you don't miss another episode.
We'll start the episode off by discussing our trip to Paisley as the Lions battle to a point against St Mirren.
Next up was our final home game of the season as a Gary Maley-inspired Livy came from behind to beat cinch sweetheart Mark McGee's Dundee.
Finally, Euan caught up with Callum Carson to review the second half of our campaign.
Livy made a final away trip of the season to Paisley to take on St Mirren. It was a closely fought game that would finish 0-0. Angus, it's been a week since the game. Have you managed to come up with any real positives about the spectacle that was put on in Paisley?
Honestly, I'm trying to think of right now as to what actually happened in that match. We kept a clean sheet. We kept unbeaten. I think we haven't done tremendously well against St Mirren this season, and I think that the fact that we were still competitive and I know what is essentially a dead rubber game is what we can be happy about. In terms of the entertainment that was there for the supporters, I'm not too sure. I think it was the game prior against St Johnstone that Davey came out and said, "Oh, at least there was 2 goals. The fans can't ask for their money back." I think this one, there'll be a couple of fans, maybe inquiring to see, what could be done to, in order of compensation to fix up what had happened there. But yeah, it's just 2 kind of teams. Like, I don't even think I would really say just seeing the season out, because I think it was, kind of a competitive match. There wasn't really much, kind of going on. I think they hit the post first half fairly early on. I think we had a good couple of chances. Alan Forrest created a good opening for himself. There was one for Joel Nobley as well, who just sort of froze in the box, found himself going through on goal. I think he tried to round the keeper, but just something didn't quite click, and Jack Anick was able to, to smother it very, very quickly. Second half, kind of the same as well. I don't think our team was, kind of properly edging it. I think there was some kind of openings were coming up through like kind of errors or just like kind of space on the counter-attacks. Nicky Devlin's cleared one off the line that was tremendously done. We also had, Odin Bailey hitting the bar via deflection as well. I don't think anybody watching in the game would have said, our team was worthy of coming out with a victory. on the basis of it, 0-0 is probably a fair result. I think maybe people would argue that we had maybe the better of like the kind of clear-cut chances, but at the same time, I think if you're a St Mirren fan and you walked away from that without a point, you would have been felt very hard done by, to be honest with you. It did provide us, probably one of the funniest moments of the season, I would say, as the game drew towards the end. I don't know, it was a corner routine for us. The ball made its way back to Jack Fitzwater, who I think it was a left-footed cross was attempted. For those who weren't at the match and didn't get the chance to see it on Sports Scene, Fitzwater's cross was probably the tamest thing you'll see all season. Thankfully, though, the comedy probably wouldn't have ended there, and he was outdone by the fact that the St Mirren counter-attack was ended by Alan Power, for some reason, properly sliding into the box, tackling the ball as it was crossed in, and hitting it so far out for a goal kick. I know that there's that Scottish football page about bad quality Scottish football on Twitter. If that didn't make the cut, then there's no point in that page existing anymore. But yeah, Euan, is there anything I've missed from that?
I mean, you kind of, that segment, I think it was in stoppage time, probably almost the last passage of play, and I think it just about perfectly summed up the game, to be honest. I was in fits of laughter, especially when Alan Power just attempted a shot, decided to slide tackle the ball out near the corner flag. It was it just kind of summed the game up. But as you say, I think there were still opportunities in the game for ourselves. Alan Forrest had one early on, as you said. Curtis Main hit the post for St Mirren. Al had another effort, and Nicky had a kind of half chance, and Nubley's one is probably the biggie. He gets through 1v1, and Joel, for all the great things he does outside the box in terms of linking the game, maybe needs a little bit more composure when he does get in and around the 18-yard box in terms of his finishing, and I'm sure that's something that he'll know and he'll be working on with the coaching team. So in terms of the first half, I think we edged it in terms of the opportunities created, as you mentioned, but second half, again, Nicky Devlin's forced a decent save from Jack Anwick on the angle, and St Mirren have had a couple of half opportunities through Flynn and Grieve, and probably the one of the best chances the game fell to us right at the end with Odin Bailey hitting the crossbar. But as you say, it was kind of summed up the whole game by that passage of play right at the end, and it wasn't a spectacle. I think it kind of sums up all the games that we've had with St Mirren this year. I think we're so closely matched, and I think it comes across in the games that it just comes to a stalemate. If you look at the previous game at St Mirren, it took 2 moments of quality to get a goal in the game at McGrath's goal and Nicky's equaliser. In those games, 2 brilliant strikes, and we didn't get any of that real quality on last Wednesday. So yeah, it wasn't a classic, but as you say, there are positives to take from it, in the sense that it's another clean sheet, 2 clean sheets in 3 games for Ivan Konovalov, which is very good for somebody that's just coming in. And we got to see Morgan Boys playing his more natural position at centre half, and it's safe to say he's definitely impressing at the tail end of this season, isn't he? Yeah, for sure. It's always kind of good having the kind of player who's comfortable and his preferred foot on that side. Yeah, he just smothers everything up every time. The ball comes to him, either in the air or he's confident, chasing back towards his own goal, playing out from the back. Yeah, he looks like a real cracking player who's going to, hopefully make a bigger impact next season as well. Opportunities became a wee bit far and few for him because of the form of Fitzwater and Oblai this season. But it's good to know that we've got competition there and a player who's very much willing and ready to to step up whenever needed. And yeah, the performances against St Mirren, and then obviously when we get on to talk about the Dundee game as well, there's been nothing but praise for him. But yeah, very exciting prospect, and hopefully one that will be here for a couple more years as well. Obviously just signed back in January, right? Didn't he? Yeah, 18 months deal.
Yeah, looking like a cracking bit of business already, and hopefully, yeah, next season we'll definitely be seeing more of him.
Was there any other players that stood out for you on the night? I know there was maybe a little bit of rotation. Davey was making a point of saying he wanted to get everyone a bit of game time in the final 2 games. Was there any other players that came in that impressed you?
trying to rack my brain in all honesty to see to think about this game in all honesty.
I'm asking you these difficult questions when you've more than likely been awake for about 15 minutes. So,
absolutely. I think, pointing out boys, I think it's fair to point out Fitzwater as well. I think Fitzy was, absolutely tremendous as he has been, all season to, act played together as if, they've done so for years. Thought Nicky Devlin at right back again, was a real driving force in that second half. A lot of the opportunities that we were getting was coming from, him running down that right-hand side and creating space. So, yeah, it's weird because I don't think there's anybody who's particularly, off it or anything like that. It's just one of those games that just kind of petered out to nothing. But yeah, boys, Fitzwater, Devlin, I think we're all, very, very solid. Ivan Konovalov, I think as well. Actually, I think something that I was very impressed with him was, his kind of his distributions from hand. There's a lot of times, he was, starting out attacks and that by, utilising what he's got like a really long throw. Hopefully, just more kind of confidence will come to him if he's going to be playing a lot more next season as well.
Yeah, I think the players you mentioned, I think another player that probably deserves a little bit of credit was Jackson Longridge. I know Jacko's been really unlucky this season in terms of injuries. He's been very much in and out of side, and then kind of from December onwards, that the form of James Penrice has meant that Jacko's not found himself in the side. So I think he had an excellent game actually coming in at left back, and very, very steady performance, which shows that Jacko still has a lot to offer. I know he's got another year left on his contract at Livingston. So, we've got good competition in that left back spot between himself and James Penrice. But it wasn't a classic in Paisley. Thankfully, the Dundee game was a bit more eventful. So we'll get onto that next.
Next up, the Lions would finish up the campaign at home as a Gary Maley-inspired Livi would come from behind to beat relegated Dundee 2-1. Euan, it was a great way to see out the season, wasn't it?
Yeah, and I think it was actually a really good game of football for what was essentially a dead rubber for both sides. Dundee obviously relegated during the week, and because the goal difference was so significant, we had 7th spot pretty much wrapped up, barring an absolute collapse. So I think it was a good game of football for essentially a dead rubber. I think Davies made 9 changes to the side, and it showed for me early doors, kind of first 15, 20 minutes. I think there was maybe a lack of rhythm in our play, and I think Dundee were probably edged the game early doors, if I'm totally honest. I think they created a few decent opportunities. McMullen's had a couple of efforts saved from Matt Stryjek, good saves from Max. Max Anderson's had an effort off the post as well. Only real kind of efforts we had, Sybil's had a shot from just outside the box, which is just gone wide, and Adam Lewis is forced to save from sharp at the tail end of the half. Really good bit of play between him and Montano on the left-hand side. And I think we grew into the game, and especially second half, I think we kind of bossed proceedings a little bit. Montano had an effort just wide, Fitzwater's had a header saved, and then we kind of get hit by a bit of a sucker punch at that point with the Milligan header. It's poor defending from our side of things. I think Jack McMullen had gone down injured just before it, and he's been outnumbered on the right hand side. I think it's almost a 3v1. It's an overload on that right hand side, and then at the back post, there's 2 boys coming in at the back post. Lewis doesn't really have a chance in that situation. I think might be Omionga's maybe lost a midfield runner in that situation. So it's a poor goal from our point of view, but the response was very good, to be honest. We've managed to be inspired to a miraculous comeback by what for me is one of the greatest moments in Livingston FC's history. The big show, the Broxburn Buffon, the people's goalie, Gary Maley, making his Premiership debut at the grand old age of 39. I've never been so excited in my life, Angus, but I've also never been almost as heartbroken as when Morgan Boys went down injured. And watching Davey turn to the bench that I'll going, I'll get ready. Right. Absolutely gutted. Gary had the kit on, he was ready for it. And then I've never been so delighted. The dream was still alive for Gary when Morgan Boys came back on the park, soldiered on. probably should have been off the park, given the fact he then had to come off. But Gary Maley, it's beautiful. I'd argue it tops the League Cup win in 2004. Seeing Gary Maley, it was that exceptional to see the big man get on in the Premiership. What a story! What a story! And then, as I say, having absolute zero influence in the goals, but just his presence on the park obviously had that desired effect. And we did get the equaliser. Andrew Shinnie reacts really well in the kind of 6-yard box. I think Devlin's had a header cleared off the line, and your man Alan Forrest I think it's a shot, to be honest, from Alan on his left foot, but Shinnie's reacted really well to kind of poke it home. And then we've got the goal which wins the game. It's a superb goal from Alan Forrest. I would say trademark, but it's on the opposite side from what he would usually do, coming in off the left-hand side onto his right foot, but it's a superb finish into the top corner. And then Gary Maley again inspiring us to victory with a save from McGinn on the edge of the box. Again, every time Gary touched the ball, the stand just erupted. It was beautiful. And I know Phoenix Drilling were sponsoring the game. Stephen Glover has the box behind us, and it was announced Gary was man of the match, and it was them that picked it. And they'd said, I spoke to Stephen at Player of the Year, and he was saying it was decided before a ball was even kicked, if Gary got on, he was getting man of the match, and rightly so, because he inspired us to a third one in 6 games. It was honestly absolutely beautiful, Angus.
There's not much more to follow up on that. For sure. Just the sheer eruption that happened whenever Gary was coming on was just absolutely tremendous. It's just one of those kind of wholesome moments, and it's just one of those things that's just pure, proper lovely to be a part of, in all honesty. Just every time you touch the ball as well, just everybody erupting into a chant and stuff like that. It's what you get involved in for those kind of moments and that. And it is going to be it might sound like we're kind of joking about in that with us, but it is going to be a memory that a lot of fans are going to have forever. In all honesty, from this season, the thing that might stick with a lot of people is going to be, mind in the final game of the season when we all got behind Gary Maley making his debut, becoming the oldest player to make his debut in the top flight this century and stuff like that. Yeah, it was just a proper lovely moment, wasn't it?
Watching him just stalk his 18-yard box like a puma stalking its prey, it was a beautiful, beautiful sight.
For the game itself, possibly the last time, we'd be seeing a handful of players. Obviously, my man Alan Forrest, possibly his last time in a Livingston shirt. No better way to seal off than with a goal and assist, especially with the fact that a triple captaindom is in the final day of fantasy football. Heartbroken when I seen that he wasn't starting. I was also terrified because Devlin was my vice captain. He also wasn't starting. So yeah. I'm glad that when he came on, Davey had a whisper in his ear, and he was like, "Here, by the way, there's fantasy points relying on you. You need to go out there and make a real effort here."
I have to have a word with Davey. Proper shafted my fantasy team on the final day, to be honest. Absolutely shafted my fantasy team.
Obviously Forrest, signing off with, stuff that he's been doing all season, the kind of opportunities he's been creating in that. What a way to kind of go out and, end your career on a very big high. Obviously not the only one. We also had, the likes of Craig Sibbald and Jack McMillan taken to the pitch for the last time. Lone players possibly, likes of Sebastian Soto, Odin Bailey, kind of a couple of players, who may not be returning. I think it was good, I think in a couple of years we've not had the chance to give certain players, the send-off. I remember, there was a bit of confusion in that first season Premiership where like Halkett and that weren't able to, kind of properly say goodbye to the fans. Obviously then we had, 2 COVID years, the season that was cut early, and then the one that was completely behind doors, meaning the likes of John Guthrie, Stephen Lawless and that Lyndon Dykes essentially weren't able to...
Alan Lithgow's the one that always sticks with me as well.
Weren't able to have proper send-offs. So, I think that was a really good touch, and, the likes of Jack McMillan and Craig Sibbald have been here for the past 4 or 5 years or so. Tremendous servants to the club, and wish them nothing but the best. And I know that we'll be coming up against them soon because they're quality players and they should be in the top flight in all honesty. But, unfortunately that's not going to be in a Livingston shirt.
Yeah, as you say, it was good to give some of these players a send-off. I think if you ask any Livy fan, I don't think they have anything bad to say about the likes of Jack McMillan, Craig Sibbald. They've been very good for the football club in I think Sibs is 4 years, Jack's 5, and their time at the club. Unfortunately, it's probably the best decision for both of them in terms of looking at their career going forward. Jack McMahon's been unlucky that some of the best players we've had over the last 5 years he's been at the football club have played in positions that he plays. He's just been very unlucky in that sense. But he's always come in and done a job wherever he's been asked to play, and typically never lets the team down. And then Sibs, this season for Sibs has just been heartbreaking for him. I think he's had COVID twice. That horrible tackle he was on the end of at Dens Park from Sean Byrne as well, which has essentially ruined his season. And if you look back at the early games when we probably weren't in our best form, I think Sibs and Holt were the two players that were kind of shining for us at that point. So I think Sibs was going to go on and have a very, very good season. But as I say, just circumstances have meant that his game time's been very limited. But wish both players and the lone players as well that are moving on, the likes of Odin Bear, I think he's been a fantastic watch. Really, really good technical player. And I do think he has an exciting future if he can keep that sort of level of performance up when he goes back down south. But we obviously got to go to Player of the Year. I think most of the players that we mentioned who were in the running for awards all got one. I was going to riot if Jason Holt didn't win an award, but he got the biggie on the night, which was Players Player of the Year. And I think both of us voted for Io's goal as well to win goal of the seasons, which won goal of the season. And our man Nicky Devlin brought home an award. He retained one of his awards from last year, which was great. And we managed to get a wee photo with Nicky. I had to stand on a chair because I'm a tad on the small side in comparison to Angus and Nicky. So stood on a chair to not look as embarrassed as the last time I had a photo with Nicky. So
what was the reason that Callum Brown wasn't able to join the photo again?
Swiping on Tinder, mate. Swiping on Tinder. I definitely was. It was. I can't remember. I think it was the Ross County game away, and they did stuff on TikTok. And one of the questions that got asked to Bruni was, "What does he have? What does he have more of? Meal deals, Tesco meal deals, or swipes on Tinder?" And it's two things that the wee man is very fond of. But no, it was a superb night. I have to say, Tam Cowan was running a bit late, but he did a great job hosting. I think some good banter. The two speakers, Dick Campbell and Eric Davidson, it was. But it was a really good night, wasn't it, Angus? Yeah,
obviously we touched on it a wee bit in the intro, and it was just a very much needed kind of night. Obviously we talked about those kind of, not only the kind of the player send-offs haven't been like there the last couple of years. That kind of association with the club has not been there either because of kind of like COVID. We've missed like a cup final and stuff like that because of restrictions and stuff. So just to be able to be in a room with everybody who's passionate about the club was absolutely tremendous. All from supporters to players, coaches, sponsors, whatever. It's just good to see everybody having a real good time. And I think there's definitely a lot of people who are having sore heads the next morning, but absolutely worth it, and just a great time to be with everybody associated at the club.
I mean, your sore head lasted until Tuesday. That's how bad a hangover you had. You were late for us recording on Tuesday. I deliberately didn't bother doing Monday because I knew you and Bruni would be. I had to head off slightly early. I had to really rein it in because I was working at 8 o'clock in the morning, so I had to drive home in the morning. So, but you pair must have been absolutely away with the fairies. I mean, if you're late for a podcast recording on a Tuesday after a Sunday night session, I guess that tells you it was a good night.
Yeah, I mean, I think the actual function finished, about 1 a.m. and then, one of the guys, I think it was Stephen from Phoenix Drilling, was like, "Yeah, we'll go back to the suite." And up there until the back end of 2 o'clock in the morning was fun. In that time though, Euan, sadly there's going to be a couple of the women's players that we're not going to be mentioning in podcasts or on match reports. I'll follow you in with that just so they don't get any joy from that. A couple of slanderous comments towards this fine establishment of a podcast, Euan, which is disappointing to hear. But all will be dealt with, and next season the slatings will come into those who deserve it, I think.
I mean, that sounds quite slanderous, Angus. I don't know how I feel about this. Ladies, feel free to drop your feedback towards Talk Livi. You know where we are on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, all the usual haunts. But no, it's been a fantastic season in my eyes, albeit maybe has a touch of what if about it in terms of not finishing in the top 6. But it's been a great end to the season, amassing our second highest points tally in our history in the top flight. So it's been another fantastic season for the football club, and we're going to get a 5th season on the bounce in the top flight next year, which, as you said earlier, Angus, I can't wait for. I'm delighted to welcome back onto the podcast the man who supports as many teams as there are countries in the world. It's the one and only Callum Carson. Carson, how you doing, mate?
I've been better. I should have just dinged the Edry game to see Gary Maley make his one and only Premiership appearance.
I tell you, what a weekend you missed. What a weekend you missed down at the Tony Mac. But yeah, your teams didn't do you too well at the weekend, did they?
No. We'll skip that bit. To be fair, at least it's a big chance missed for Edry. I have to say, I can't see them getting out of that league anytime soon. Now, I think that was a big chance.
At least you'll finish above Falkirk. That's a nailed-on certainty, is it not?
You'd like to think so. There's going to come a point where Falkirk aren't terrible.
Oh no, we can't have that.
I don't know when that will happen. But
that's one of the best things about Scottish football these days is Falkirk being absolutely woeful.
There's only so many seasons in a row you can make every single wrong decision possible.
Oh dear, but we're not here to talk Falkirk. We're here to talk about Livi, who you cover on a regular basis. Now, last time we had you on, it was bang on the halfway point of the season. Safe to say it's been a pretty successful second half of the campaign, hasn't it?
Aye, absolutely. I think, if I remember correctly, I said at the halfway point that I think they would survive, but I wasn't entirely confident. I think it's safe to say they kind of had a strong second half and survived with ease, really.
Yeah, it was. I remember us talking about that, and I think both of us said that January and February were probably going to be the make or break of the season with the fixtures we had, and we did. Obviously, we had the Motherwell game on Boxing Day, the behind closed doors game after we spoke, but after that, we got a couple of massive results, starting off with the game against Dundee, and that kind of seemed to get the ball rolling, didn't it?
Aye, that was a massive win. In hindsight, that was a huge win, because if you come away, after the 3-week break, straight into it, and let's say you get beat at home to Dundee, that kind of instantly kind of makes things that much more tricky. But to do it, and it was 2-0 going on, it was a comfortable 2-0. And I think even though it was the one game, you could actually tell that it was a different Bruce Anderson as well.
Yeah, he's become a totally different player second half of the season. I know he's missed the last few weeks with injury, but he really seemed to turn a corner. And I know Davey spoke a lot. We spoke at length about Shinnie playing as a false nine, but Bruce seemed to add that outside the box play to his game, didn't he?
Definitely. I think he's acknowledged that as well, that I think it was just a case of continuing to work hard, and suddenly the extra 1% he was getting in training translated into games, and you could tell from August to even January, February, you could tell there was a huge difference in the non-goal scoring aspect of his play, which has come on leaps and bounds.
Do you think Bruce is maybe a bit unlucky with his injury? Do you reckon he could have played himself into the Scotland squad this summer?
Aye, definitely. I think, because I actually spoke, so the Scotland squad was going to be announced on the Monday, and I can't remember what game it was, but there was a Saturday game, and I think Bruce scored a couple, and Davey was like, he's got to be in with a shout. And it was the Monday that he did his ankle in. And I remember, I actually spoke to Davey, kind of off the record. I was like, oh, is Bruce in the Scotland squad? And he goes, no, he's buggered his ankle. He goes, but we weren't actually going to make that public just in case he got picked in the squad. But I mean, as it happened, he wasn't in the squad, and the ankle injury was a lot more significant than they probably thought on that first day. But you look at, what was it, 7 or 8 goals in 13 games?
Yeah.
Something like that. I think if he had another 7 or 8 games, he certainly could have got the golden boot.
Oh, definitely.
Because, I mean, Charles Cook won it, and I don't think he scored in his final 10 or 11 games. I don't think he was a million miles off it. I think I remember saying at the time that I wouldn't pick him at that point, but if he had another 10 games and scored 5 or 6 goals, I think it would have been impossible to ignore him.
Yeah, I think the timing of the games, it was meant to be the playoff games in March. So
that was it. Yeah.
I think I'd kind of agreed with what you said when you posted it on the forum, and I thought the summer would have been his best bet with it being the Nations League games.
Definitely.
And I thought that, if Clark's more likely to draft in folk for games, it might be that, because we had 4 games as well, so getting a better look at folk. But is it bad to say that maybe if Bruce's injury at the tail end of the season might help us for next season in terms of staying put at Livi?
That's exactly what I thought. See, when Davey said it was kind of likely to be a season-ending one, I was like, from a Livi perspective, I'm not sure that's an entirely bad thing. Because again, kind of going on to what we were saying about the Scotland squad, if he continued that run and added another 5 or 6 goals, I think it would have been very difficult to keep hold of him this summer. And if you can get a fully fit Bruce Anderson playing at the level he was before he was injured, you've got to be looking at a 15-plus goal a season striker.
And Bruce obviously managed to sweep up a few awards, but he's definitely got to be signing in the season at our end, hasn't he?
Aye, definitely.
Albeit me and you are actually one of the strange ones in the Livi support, and we're actually fans of Jet and acknowledge that the big man has a bit of ability about him, but obviously a lot of Livi fans seem to have a bit of dislike, despite the fact he was second top goal scorer last year. But
it's I will always say kind of March to May Jet last year as the most naturally gifted footballer I've seen in 8 seasons at Livi. He was utterly phenomenal. The problem was it took 6 months to get to 6 or 7 months to get to March to get him playing that level.
But as we talk about the second half of the campaign, obviously started with that win at Dundee, but we picked up another few vital wins, a couple of really impressive performances on the road as well, which has been a massive talking point in previous seasons with Livi, that we can only win on plastic, can't win on grass. But went to places like Easter Road, hammered Dundee at Dens, went to Tannadice early in the season as well, and then going up to Pittodrie and winning up there again. Have you noticed a big difference in terms of the way the team approaches games away from home in the past couple of seasons? Obviously, you were able to go to all the games last year as well because of your job. Of course,
yeah. I don't necessarily think there's a difference in how they approach games. I think they probably go into away games wanting to manage the first 15, 20 minutes a wee bit more often than at home games. As you were kind of mentioning that Dens Park game, if you're 3-0 up after 20 minutes, you'll take that whether you tried to manage the game or not. But I don't know. It's a hard one to describe because there's not an obvious kind of change. It's not like they play great, flowing, attacking 4-3-3 football at home every week and go away from home in this stuffy 4-5-1 and kind of try and pick up the odd draw here and there. It is a very similar style of play. I do think they probably kind of short it back a wee bit at the start and almost kind of try and suss out the opposition.
This is maybe being a bit too psychological with it, but do you think last season, with the games being behind closed doors and managing to kind of put to record that away day hoodoo, do you reckon that's maybe given them a bit of confidence going into this season? Obviously, fans have been back in. Do you reckon that's maybe changed the mindset a little bit for the players as well?
Probably. it might be going a wee bit too deep. Maybe it's one of those kind of subconscious things that on paper it kind of makes sense, but it's not something you're actively necessarily thinking about, even though it probably is true. That's probably a part of it as well, because they were kind of noticeably better away from home kind of last year than they had been in the 2 previous years.
Well, to put it in perspective, we picked up 26 points at Livi this year and 23 points on the road. So it's almost 50-50 in terms of getting our points now, which, to be honest, I kind of spoke about it on the podcast our first couple of seasons. There'll come a point where our home form's not going to be excellent. And we're going to have to rely on picking more points up away from home. And that's probably been the case this year. We've maybe not picked up the same amount of wins that we have done in our first 2-3 seasons in the league, but we've certainly managed to balance that out. But certainly we had a very good January and February, and safe to say that probably put us out with looking over our shoulder maybe, and started having us looking towards Europe. I think the Dundee United midweek game put us fourth.
That was the big one.
At that point, were you believing that European football was realistic?
You certainly had that kind of buzz that, bloody hell, this might actually happen. You know, you still are kind of in the mindset of, especially talking to Davey, who Davey goes 10th every single week. So you because you kind of chat to him so often, I almost kind of became of that mindset that sure, 4th is great and there's 10 games to go, but as long as they stay in the top 6, or as long as they, comfortably survive, then that's the main aim.
I think I need to get 10th and above as success tattooed somewhere on me, because that's that's a regular quote of mine on the podcast.
Oh, Hoppy did that in the champion. Obviously not 10th, but his was 8th. They were like 3 games to go, and they booked the playoffs. And I was like, I'm just delighted we finished 8th. You know what I mean?
I was talking about that watching the playoffs with Arbroath just there, and Dick Campbell's very much been of that. I'm not really focusing on it. Not really focusing on it. And the first time he ever spoke about getting promotion was the playoff games, and Hoppy was very, very similar.
Very similar.
Even then with the semi-finals, like, I just really hope we get to the final. As long as we get to the final. Even then, he's not talking about winning the playoffs.
It takes the pressure off. Yeah, I guess it is kind of good management in that sense. But back to the original point, did I think... I thought it was possible, and I thought it was possible mainly because there was no sign of any other team going on a decent run. I think the fact that Dundee United and Motherwell are in Europe is probably more down to other teams' failures than necessarily Dundee United or Motherwell being brilliant and kind of earning that 4th or 5th spot. So there was definitely, you saw the league table every week. There was points where 6 points were separating 8 teams, things like that. So you thought it was possible, but at the same time, you didn't want to get carried. You didn't want to get kind of too carried away with that.
Yeah, I think when we went 4th, I still came on the podcast and was like, look, 10th is still success. 10th is still success. You get it out your head. European football, blah, blah, blah.
It prepares you for the kind of disappointment if you don't get it.
Well, we certainly had that disappointment, and
the
Motherwell game. Sum up the Motherwell game, Carson. That was literally, we had everything. Everything was going our way on the day. I think Ross County were drawing up at Pittodrie, Hearts were beating Hibs, and then ourselves were 2-0 up, and we were absolutely bossing Motherwell for the first 70 minutes of the game as well.
That was the best.
That's got to be the biggest sucker punch I think we've faced in a number of years, isn't it?
That was a sickener, that one, because they'd actually had quite a poor run of form going into that game, and the first 70 minutes of that Motherwell game was probably the best performance they'd had for a good kind of 6 weeks or so. But as soon as was it Slattery? Was it Callum Slattery that scored as soon as that went in, you kind of like, oh, right, okay, this could get interesting. And it was quite funny because there was actually a point where, before Ross County scored, there was actually a point where Motherwell were trying to get the equaliser, even though they didn't actually need it. If that kind of made sense, like they're actually risking themselves getting into the top 6 by Livi going and scoring another 1 or 2 on the break. But as it was, and it was Ricky Lamb. Yeah, it had to be Ricky Lamb.
Obviously, because of what Semple said. I'm surprised they didn't run up pointing at Semple in the stand. For anyone who doesn't know, Andy once described Ricky Lammy as a bottom half Premiership player in an article he did. And Ricky actually came. I was interviewing Robbie McCrory and got asked, is there a particular reason why Ricky's looking for you guys, in particular Andy? And had to make it very clear to Ricky that I have nothing against him. And and it was Semple's words, not mine. But yeah, it was an absolute sickener off a blow.
It was just, I mean, Nicky spoke about it after the game that the second goal was just it was amateur, wasn't it? It was really the clearance. It shouldn't have been a corner because I think it was Oblak. I can't remember who it was.
Yeah,
kind of splat clearance, and then they've had 3 different chances to clear the header, to clear the corner. It's frustrating. But you kind of knew going into the season, losing John Guthrie, having 3 midgets in the centre of the park, having Bruce Anderson, you kind of knew that set plays were going to be an issue, and kind of unfortunately they were a negative issue at kind of the worst possible moment.
Yeah, there was also a few baffling referee decisions on that run in towards that deciding game against Motherwell. Actually, a bad decision in that game could have put us 3-0 up. Definite penalty on Nicky, but
100%.
You obviously speak to Davey and Marv a bit more off the record than any of us get to hear. Now, Davey was openly frustrated with the Kevin Clancy one, but off camera, off mic, how bad was it? That was staggering. Do you know, before Davey actually came to the press, it was Murray Davidson did the St Johnstone. He was the St Johnstone guy, and I think he said something like that. Cleary told me it hit his shoulder, and he's lying. Just kind of, you know, it was like, it was so obvious. To this day, I still can't understand how it's not been given. And Soto, and it was actually even more baffling after the press, because Soto said he spoke to the referee, and the ref said he couldn't give it because he fell over. Which is, I still can't get my head around that. And obviously there was a wee break. No, there wasn't a wee break after that game, was there? It was the Motherwell game where there was a break. Yeah, it was a Motherwell game after that, and then we had that decision at 2-0 in that Motherwell game, didn't we? Which for me, you're bang in line with it where it was in the box, and that was Stonewall penalty in my opinion as well, and Devlin. So, but
Davey, he wasn't actually quite as outwardly livid as I thought he might be with that penalty, but he was definitely. You could tell that he was trying to rein it in terms of what he was actually saying. I will never understand how that wasn't given.
But it did mean that we finished in the bottom 6. But certainly the team have managed to put a bit of a split hoodoo to bed, haven't they, this year? 3 wins, a couple of draws, last 6 games unbeaten as well. That Aberdeen game in particular was very important because that pretty much made it mathematically safe as well, given other results on the day. What have you made of the performances post-split? And do you think Davies maybe had these games as an eye to next year with some of the personnel that's played a lot of minutes, like some Morgan Boys who's been in a lot? Ivan had to play games as well, but I'm sure he would have got games regardless in these last few games. You think Davies had a bit of an eye towards next year?
Aye, for definite. I think full credit to the team for the way they did bounce back, because it would have been easy to kind of wallow after that Motherwell game, and then obviously getting arguably the 2 toughest games in Aberdeen and Hibs straight up, whilst I think St Johnstone had Dundee and St Mirren.
That was planned. That is planned by the SPFL, by the way. They were desperately hoping that we got dragged in off the back of those 2 games.
there was a very real possibility that Livingston were going into that St Johnstone game 2 points ahead of St Johnstone, so absolutely full credit to kind of the way they bounced back. In terms of how Davy kind of managed things, there was definitely kind of certainly after the Aberdeen game anyway, there was certainly an eye towards next season. He needed to see how good Konovalov was. I know obviously you don't sign him if you think he's rubbish and you see him every day in training, so you have a rough idea, but it's different in training and in games.
Yeah.
Same with Morgan Boys. Morgan Boys was basically signed in January, like Ivan was, with a view to next season, so he needed to play. And I thought both of them actually played really well.
Yeah, I've been really impressed with Morgan Boys, given he's played a couple of games out of position as well at left back, really. But he's looked very, very assured for a young lad that's not played a lot of first team football, to be fair to him. So he's definitely one to look forward to for next season. But obviously we've made a bit of transfer business already, 3 guys coming in. I mean, you're bound to support a team in each of the countries that they're from, so you must have a good idea about them, Carson, already.
Do you know what? This is actually the truth. Not that I support them, but the day before they signed Philip Kankar, I actually took the Western Sydney gig in Football Manager. So the first thing I did when I heard they were signing the boy was like, look at his stats, and I was like, oh, he's all right. He's been a solid centre back for me. I think I'm third after about 12 games. But they needed. David was kind of quite open about the need for kind of that more physicality and height. Certainly, kind of in the defensive midfield role, and I think kind of going back to plans for next season, playing Sean Kelly in that kind of defensive midfield role, I think that was certainly with an eye to next season, whether it's Sean or Bitsindi that plays there. I think that's a kind of definite defensive midfielder with a bit of height.
Yeah, affectionately he's going to be known as Scott Ficongo, though.
Ficongo, Steve Fitogo.
Steve Fitogo and Scott Ficongo. Brilliant, absolutely brilliant. I love it. But you've mentioned that's certainly something, and I know Davey's been very open about that when he's spoken to the press, that his set plays, defending set plays, scoring for set plays is a big thing that he's going to be looking towards for next season, isn't it?
Aye, for sure. And you need height to do that. You're not going to defend set plays and score goals for set plays if you're relying on Nicky Devlin, Jason Holt, Scott Pittman to kind of win your headers.
Kind of looking at the second half of the season, I think both of us agreed that Jason Holt had been the standout first half, but safe to say he deserved his Players Player of the Year award, didn't he? I was going to riot if he didn't come away with an award.
Oh, aye. He was my Player of the Year. But what I would say was there was genuinely about 5 or 6 folk that you could vote for and kind of have no real argument. If someone thought it was Bruce, if someone thought it was Nicky, if someone thought it was even wee Pitts, I know he was out injured for a wee spell, but when he was playing, he was quality. Odin, Alan Forrest, there's genuinely like 5, 6 that I don't think you could really argue either way with. But Holt would have got my vote purely because, well, firstly, he started every game other than the Dundee game, so that always helps. But he was consistently very good. I don't remember ever leaving a game thinking Jason Holt had a bad game.
I always try and base it off when we've had down periods in the season who's still impressed.
Jason Holt.
And I think
the first 10 games, Jason Holt. Actually, Jason Holt and Craig Sibbald were by far the 2 best players in kind of the first 7 or 8 games of the season.
Yeah, Sibbs has been desperately unlucky this year, hasn't he?
That's a real shame. A real shame for him. I think the same with Jack McMillan. I think it's the right time both for the club and the player to kind of look elsewhere. But hopefully they're still playing Premiership football, because they're certainly good enough.
Another one that was confirmed on Sunday night at Player of the Year, for those who weren't there, is Keegan Jacobs will be moving on, which is going to be obviously very devastating for a lot of Livi fans, but it's another one that it makes sense for both parties, and I think it's the best for both parties, isn't it?
Aye, absolutely. As long as it's not Falkirk, he goes, we'll sign him at Edry. I think Dicey's got another year left. I'm not entirely sure. If Dicey's got another year, then get his pal Keegan along. That'll do. But I mean, what a servant to the club. I know, obviously, Pitts has kind of had some accolades and records of late, and Davies kind of said, "Oh, this will, Pitts was what Pitts is doing will never be replicated by a player at Livingston." But I remember being stats daft that I actually remember sitting down when Keegan signed for Falkirk and kind of worked out how many games Keegan's missed through injury.
Yeah.
And I think, so he's played 309, and I can't remember the figure off the top of my head, but I think even if Keegan had a couple of wee niggles throughout the years, Keegan could have played 500 plus games for Livi quite comfortably.
Definitely. I mean, I think he's had an ACL, 2 leg breaks, and then this foot injury he had.
Sorry, he's probably missed 4 full seasons in terms of games.
Yeah, he's been
with injuries.
He's been desperately unlucky, but as you say, what a servant! Incredible memories he's given Livi fans. I remember when I coached at the football club, or volunteered at the football club, I coached with Keegan when he was a 16-year-old, just kind of making his way and breaking into the team with his Justin Bieber style haircut. And you don't kind of think then that you're going to come across a guy that's the first guy to get a testimonial, plays in all 4 divisions for the football club, scores in all 4 divisions for the football club. And I've never really spoken about this, but when we went into the playoffs, I was having a bit of a difficult period in my personal life, and the goals that Keegan scored in those playoffs, it just reminds you how big an outlet football can be. And totally. Especially for how he gave, certainly for myself, gave me a moment where I could kind of forget what was going on. And that goal, obviously meant so much in terms of the club, but it means a lot to me personally as well. So, Keegan's given me, and I'm sure all Livi fans, some of the best moments they'll ever have supporting the football club. So,
absolutely,
as Davey mentioned on Sunday night, he'll be welcome back at the club anytime. But it's obviously such a shame to see him go. But in terms of looking at the season, what would you say has been the moment of the season for the team, Carson?
Being 3-0 up at Dundee within 20 minutes was exceptional. It was. It's just everything clicked. I know Dundee were kind of they played a large part in their own downfall, but they were so good, Livi, for that kind of first 20 minutes. In terms of the moment of the season, we obviously beating Celtic. In terms of the entire season, beating Celtic's the main one. The second half is probably the Dundee United one at home, because that's the moment where you thought, oh right, okay, this could actually be not just a good season. This could actually be a very special season.
Yeah,
didn't quite pan out that way, obviously, but it's kind of the hope that keeps you going as a football fan, isn't it? So I definitely remember thinking at that point that this could be something, and then obviously Davey kind of starts outwardly kind of talking about it, and I think Steph did the press that game and was like, yeah, Europe, that would be kind of crazy, huh?
He didn't read the script. He didn't read Davey's script. 10th, Steph, man, 10th. We might be 4th, it's 10th. We're only saying 10th.
No, that was probably in a lot of respects, that was probably the most satisfying kind of win. It kind of confirmed that you were safe as well. There was never any danger of getting dragged back in at that point.
I think for me, obviously, whenever you beat any half of the Old Firm, that's pretty special. But
Aye.
I still always go back in terms of an away day, the 95th minute winner from Sir Thomas Parks was absolutely unreal for an away day. Brilliant away. I was so hungover that day. I needed that. And one of the rare Saturday mornings I get off from Ainsley Park at Spartans, but that was pretty special. Easter Road as well, Alan Forrest's winner, which we Alan.
That was a right good performance, that one.
Yeah, brilliant second half performance. That made a tactical tweak. Second half went to a back three and they caused Hibs all sorts of problems. Second half, we Alan Forrest was funny conversation I had on Sunday night with Nicky and Alan walking in, and I was asking him what's your goal of the season, and Nicky's going, well, Al seems to think I've got no chance when I go at St Mirren. And Alan's going, aye, but my one, it's top corner, it's at Easter Road, we were 2 each at the time, it was a winner. So Alan I think he thought he was maybe getting an award for goal of the season for his effort at Easter Road, but he's going to be a big miss next year, isn't he? Because it's pretty nailed on that he's going to be moving on. But again, you speak to the gaffer quite regularly. I think he says he's probably got 50% of his business done, hasn't he?
Aye. I think he's basically after a left winger, a right winger, a striker. I think he'd be happy if that's his lot. And even the 3 guys he's signed, there's absolutely no pressure on them to come in and start playing 90 minutes every week. Davies kind of, assuming players stay, assuming Fitzy doesn't get sold, Bruce, Max, whoever, Steph, assuming the players that are under contract are still at the club come July, I think Davies quite happy to even have kind of the 15, 16 guys that from this year's team that are still under contract kind of being the main part of the team, certainly in the early parts of next season, to allow guys to bed in.
Well, it's, in my eyes, even though we did finish 7th, it's maybe one of those seasons where you look back then as a what if season if we did manage to get into the top half. But I think that's our second best points tally recorded in the top flight in our history, which is pretty successful for a club on our resources. So all in, it's been a successful season. And Carson, just a wee thank you for all the coverage that you give the football club. The coverage you give the club is second to none. So I'm sure all the fans really appreciate your efforts over the season as well.
Thank you.
That is it. That is it for the 21-22 season, I guess. It's been pretty decent, hasn't it?
Yeah, very good season. A lot of good chat, a lot of good interaction with people, and just a massive thanks to everybody who's listened, contributed, or even just left a couple of comments or so. It's very much appreciated.
Yeah, a huge thank you to the guests that we've had on this year. The gaffer, David Martindale, was on at the start of the year. Callum Carson, Kyle Jacobs, Stuart Lovell. There's been quite a few, but all the fans that have come on to do analysis for games and previews and things like that. It's been great to add that to the podcast this kind of second half of the year. So thank you so much for all your contribution. And as I say, just a massive thank you to all our listeners for tuning in throughout the season. We had a couple of milestones throughout this year as well, which was great for us. So thank you for your continued support of the podcast. But me and Angus are going to have a little break, try and enjoy the summer. What you got planned for the summer, mate? I've
got a music festival in the Czech Republic that I'm looking forward to. Other than that, looking forward to the Betfred Cup coming back and getting back at it.
That sounds pretty decent. I'm too old to go to music festivals now, unfortunately. My plans consist of, I've got my brother's stag do in Dublin. Weekend after, I'm hoping to be down in Cardiff watching Scotland make it to Qatar in the World Cup playoff game. Hopefully they get through the Ukraine game, and then I'm back in Dublin the weekend after that for our Nations League game. So safe to say I won't be doing an awful lot come the Betfred games, because I'm going to be bankrupt after those 3 weekends on the bounce. But I'm obviously looking forward to the international football. I'm one of these rare people that enjoys international football because it's essentially my holidays for the year. So I'm looking forward to that.
So that's it for this week's episode of Talk Livi. Thanks again to every single one of you for tuning in week and week out. If you can, we'd love to hear your feedback. Either leave us a review on iTunes or simply message us on Twitter, Facebook or Instagram.
As Angus said, we're on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram. Search Talk Livi to find us and you'll find all the links to our weekly episodes on there as well. You can also find all our episodes, including this one, on all good podcast streaming sites, including iTunes and Spotify. We're also on YouTube, so don't forget to subscribe to the channel. And if none of those options suit you, all you have to do is head to our website, talklivipodcast.libsyn.com, where you'll find every single episode we've done over the last few years.
And that's it for this week and this season. Thanks to all our listeners yet again for tuning in, and it's been a good campaign. Let's hope for another great season following the Lothian's finest football team next year.
West Lothian is our battle cry. This is the place from which we hail. Livingston, oh Livingston, it's up to Amberville. Livingston, 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 oh Livingston, oh Livingston, we love it when you score. Livingston, oh Livingston, the Amberville Lions roar. Livingston, oh Livingston, we realize our vision. Livingston, oh Livingston, into the